In the beginning, we see a woman unable to find sleep. A young woman named Iris embarks on a solitary journey in the middle of the night. She drives along a forest road, occasionally glancing at a toy boat she carries with her, until she reaches a secluded park. There, she ascends a cliff and discovers a memorial dedicated to a child who tragically lost their life at that very spot. Overcome with emotion, Iris weeps over the child's photograph and contemplates ending her own life by stepping off the cliff. However, her plans are interrupted when a man named Richard appears, sits down nearby, and engages her in conversation. Richard explains that he came to the park seeking solitude and asks Iris to listen to his story. Richard confides in Iris about his past, revealing that he had a car and a cherished girlfriend named Chloe. Tragically, their relationship ended abruptly when he crashed his car into a brick wall, resulting in Chloe's untimely death. Their argument just before the accident adds to his anguish. Despite Iris's attempt to offer sympathy, Richard remains resentful, as everyone around him responded similarly after the accident. He endured a paralyzing state for nearly 3 months, reliant on machines and growing irritated by the constant expressions of sympathy from visitors. In a turn of events, Iris discloses that her husband had carved their names into a tree, while their son gathered sticks for roasting marshmallows. While Iris was picking flowers, her son fell from a height, leaving her devastated and questioning her will to live. Richard, her companion, assures her that being broken doesn't equate to hopelessness and prepares to leave. Iris decides against jumping and follows him, but when she tries to get into her car, she finds that Richard has parked too close, blocking her exit. He then knocks her unconscious with a stun gun and binds her in the backseat of his car. Panicking, Iris tries to call for help using her watch, but Richard informs her that there's no signal in the remote area. He mocks her attempts to persuade him to release her and taunts her with her son's toy boat. As Iris reminisces about her pocket knife, she cautiously retrieves it and begins to cut her bonds. To distract Richard, she initiates a conversation about his family, but he cunningly shifts the topic to her deceased son, compelling her to continue talking. However, Richard remains unfazed by her tactics and declares his intention to take her to his secluded cabin in the woods, where he envisions braiding her hair. Determined to escape, Iris seizes the opportunity and stabs him, narrowly missing a fatal blow. The injured Richard loses control of the car, crashing it into a tree and hitting his head. Despite his attempts to restrain her, Iris fights back fiercely, and they both end up spilling out of the car on opposite sides. With newfound freedom, Iris swiftly cuts the ropes binding her feet and frantically searches for help, only to find herself stranded on a deserted road. Meanwhile, Richard emerges from the wreckage, lamenting the loss of a perfect opportunity. Despite everything going according to plan, Richard foolishly overlooks checking her pockets, leading to unforeseen consequences. Oddly remarking on her desire to end her life, he reveals that he injected her with a substance that will soon paralyze her, rendering her immobile and unable to resist his control. As the effects begin to manifest, Richard offers her a hand, but Iris flees into the forest, losing her knife in the process. Despite her deteriorating dexterity, she continues to run, desperately trying to escape Richard's pursuit as her body succumbs to the numbing effects of the injected substance. As Iris's body succumbs to paralysis, she crawls to a hollow under tree roots and hides. Richard's taunting voice draws near, but she remains concealed. Insects crawl onto her face, prompting her to roll out of the hollow. Richard hears her cry and returns, but Iris throws herself into the river and is swept away. Despite Richard's warning, she manages to stay afloat and reaches the shore, where she lies immobilized in a meadow. Suddenly, she notices a nearby structure, and an older man approaches her on a lawnmower. Recognizing her alertness, he comprehends that she can communicate through blinking. Iris signals that she requires assistance rather than medical attention. As the man leaves to retrieve a wheelbarrow, Iris, lying on the grass, takes a moment to appreciate the serene beauty of her surroundings. The sun, the clear sky adorned with the fading trail of an airplane, and the lush greenery. Upon his return, The man carries her to his cabin with the intention of calling for help. However, their plans are interrupted when someone knocks on the door. The old man answers it to find Richard standing outside, looking desperate and pleading for assistance in finding his injured wife, who was involved in an accident. A man named Richard enters an old man's house despite being asked to wait outside, complaining of feeling unwell and looking for his lost phone. The old man becomes suspicious and asks Richard to leave, promising to help him find his phone. Richard reveals that his wife is mentally ill and he fears she'll be institutionalized if the police find her. He blames himself for allowing her to drive, causing an accident that left her missing. As Richard expresses his love for his wife, the old man notices Iris, Richard's wife, lying hidden under the couch, unsure of who is truly in danger. The old man is reminded of his own wife, who neglected her health while fussing over him, leaving him alone after her passing. After confessing his dishonesty, Richard's deceit is exposed when his phone rings, prompting the man to demand his departure. Richard inquires about the presence of the man's wheelbarrow in the kitchen, leading to the revelation that the old man has hidden a woman in his shed. Despite the man's request for both of them to leave and forget the incident, Richard proceeds towards the shed, snatching the man's phone. The old man feigns compliance but shoves Richard, causing him to fall into a cabinet that topples onto him. The man seizes the opportunity to call emergency services, but Richard retaliates, resulting in a struggle that ends with the old man overpowering him. Richard manages to find a knife and stabs the old man, leaving Iris helpless as she witnesses the man's death. Richard retrieves a gasoline canister from the shed and sets the house ablaze, unaware that Iris has managed to tap her finger on the floor. As Iris reaches a blind cord while seated in the old man's truck, Richard notices the blinds moving and rescues her from the burning house, placing her in the truck's front seat. As they drive away, Richard berates Iris for causing him to kill the old man, something he had never done before. Unexpectedly, his phone rings, and Iris hears his daughter's voice announcing their upcoming visit to the cabin in the mountains. Richard feigns excitement and asks them to bring everything for a picnic, though Iris notices his rage, which nearly causes an accident with an oncoming bus. Later, realizing they are low on gas, Richard stops at a nearby station. An ambulance rushes by and smoke rises over the hill where the old man's house burned. Richard places a cap on Iris's head and leaves to pay for the gas. Iris tries to signal for help, but her body barely cooperates. Still, she manages to unfasten her seatbelt, turn toward the window, and drop the cap from her head. Suddenly, a child's face appears at the window, staring intently at her. Before Iris can make any noticeable sign, Richard reappears and the boy's mother arrives. Sensing something is wrong, but unable to pinpoint it, she takes the boy away, glancing back at Iris several times. Richard gets back in, floors the gas, and they soon arrive at the site of his original crash, where his damaged car still stands. After changing into new clothes, Richard starts fixing his car, while Iris gradually regains movement in her fingers. A highway patrol officer arrives after a concerned woman from a gas station reports a vehicle matching Richard's license plate. Despite Richard's attempts to dismiss the officer's inquiries, the officer remains suspicious due to the strange truck and Richard's bruised face. In that crucial moment, Iris manages to slightly open the window, prompting the officer to take a closer look. Richard tries to deceive the officer by introducing Iris as his wife, claiming she's struggling with alcohol after losing their child. He even uses the real name of her son and recounts the actual story of the boy's death, causing Iris to shed tears. Touched by her distress, the officer almost believes Richard's story. However, Iris manages to whisper, "Help," and the officer notices zip ties and a filled syringe in the truck, leading him to suspect illegal activity. As the officer reaches for his weapon, Richard swiftly strikes first, hitting him with a metal chain and brutally beating him to death. After loading the officer's body into the patrol car and setting it ablaze, Richard drives away from the scene, blaming Iris for the officer's death. Iris, now able to speak, retorts that his mental state is the cause, recalling his story about the hospital and hinting that his mind fractured then. Richard pulls over and explains that seeing his girlfriend's broken neck gave him clarity and a sense of purpose, thanking her death for granting him this divine mission. Iris reminds him of his family and their love for him, reasoning that this madness must end. She suggests he let her go since she knows nothing about his true identity or background, ensuring he won't be caught. However, Richard changes course, taking her to a nearby lake. At the shore, Iris attempts to inject Richard with a syringe, but fails due to her weakened state. Recalling her earlier suicidal thoughts, Iris stabs Richard in the neck as he retrieves her son's toy boat. Despite Richard's struggle, Iris shoots him, causing him to sink beneath the water. Exhausted, Iris collapses in the boat as it fills with water from bullet holes. She sinks, bound, while the toy boat floats peacefully on the surface. Emerging alive, Iris finds Richard still alive and surprisingly thanks him. This budget-friendly horror story presents familiar plot twists in a measured and well-acted thriller, though it lacks gore and excessive dialogue, which may vary in appeal depending on individual preferences. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to support us to provide more